My beloved child, pause here for a moment, because what you are about to hear did not reach you by accident. Something has been waiting for you beneath the silence, beneath the distance, beneath every unanswered question you have carried in your heart. Do not move away from this message too quickly. There is a truth approaching you now, and once it is revealed, you will understand why your soul has felt restless, why certain memories have returned without warning, and why the person connected to your heart has been unable to find peace. Heaven has watched you trying to make sense of what was never fully explained. You have searched through old conversations, quiet moments, changed behavior, and words that seemed to carry more meaning than they revealed. You have wondered whether you imagined the depth of this connection. You have asked yourself whether the silence was an answer, whether the distance meant rejection, and whether the love you once felt was real or merely something your heart created because it needed hope. But listen closely. The silence was never empty. Your soulmate has been hiding one final truth, and this truth is heavier than anything they have admitted before. It is not a small secret. It is not a passing emotion. It is something they have carried through sleepless nights, distracted mornings, and moments when the world around them continued as normal while their heart quietly stood still. They have tried to bury it. They have tried to convince themselves that time would make it disappear. Yet the more they avoided it, the stronger it became. And now they believe they are running out of time. Do not skip what comes next, because there is a reason this person has suddenly begun thinking about disappearing from your life completely. It is not because they stopped caring. It is not because your connection meant nothing. The truth is far more complicated, and before this message ends, you will begin to see why their final decision is connected to something they have never had the courage to tell you. There was a moment, not long ago, when your soulmate sat alone and imagined what life would feel like if they never spoke to you again. They pictured years passing. They imagined hearing your name unexpectedly. They imagined seeing you happy from a distance, perhaps standing beside someone who gave you the honesty they could not give. And in that vision, something inside them broke. They realized that disappearing would not erase what they felt. It would only force them to live with it in silence. But they are still considering it, because they believe their presence may complicate your life. They have convinced themselves that leaving might be an act of love. They tell themselves that if they vanish before revealing the truth, you will eventually heal. They believe you will forget the confusion, forget the waiting, forget the emotional pull that neither of you has been able to explain. Yet heaven sees what they cannot. You would not simply forget. A part of you would always wonder why. That unanswered question is the very reason this truth is being brought into the light now. You were never meant to carry confusion forever. You were never meant to believe that your heart was foolish for feeling something powerful. You were never meant to punish yourself because another person lacked the courage to speak. Your soulmate's silence has never been proof that you were unworthy of honesty. It has been proof that they were afraid of what honesty would require. Because once they tell you this final truth, they can no longer pretend that you were just another person passing through their life. They can no longer hide behind timing, circumstances, pride, or uncertainty. They would have to admit that meeting you changed them. They would have to admit that losing your closeness affected them more deeply than they ever allowed you to see. And there is more. The final truth is not only about love. It is also about a choice they made. Stay with me, because this is where the story begins to shift. There was a time when your soulmate stood at an emotional crossroads. One path led toward vulnerability, confession, and the possibility of building something real with you. The other path led toward silence, familiarity, and a life that felt safer because it demanded less courage. They chose the safer path. But they never found peace there. They may have smiled. They may have continued their routine. They may have appeared certain about their direction. From the outside, it may have looked as though they had moved on without difficulty. Yet behind that appearance was a private battle they never shared. Every step away from you made them more aware of what they were leaving behind. They began comparing every new conversation to the way you understood their unspoken emotions. They began noticing how rare it was to feel seen without needing to explain everything. They realized that what existed between you was not something easily replaced. Still, they remained silent. Why? Because they feared that the moment had already passed. They feared that you had grown stronger without them. They feared that you had finally stopped waiting for clarity. They feared that if they returned with the truth now, you would look at them and ask the question they have been dreading. Why did you wait until it was almost too late? They do not have an easy answer. Their delay was not caused by the absence of feeling. It was caused by the intensity of it. Some people run from what means nothing. Others run from what means everything because they know it has the power to transform them. Your soulmate has been living in that second kind of fear. They understood that loving you honestly would demand the death of an older version of themselves. The version that hid behind silence, avoided difficult conversations, and believed emotional distance could keep them safe. But now that older version is collapsing. Something happened recently that forced them to confront what they had been avoiding. It may have been a conversation, a dream, a photograph, a song, a familiar place, or the unexpected mention of your name. Whatever form it took, the moment pierced through the wall they had built. Suddenly, they could no longer pretend they were unaffected. For a few seconds, everything became clear. They saw the future they might lose. They saw you moving forward without them. They saw the door closing. And that is when the thought of disappearing forever entered their mind, not because they wanted to erase you, but because they feared they had already lost the right to return. My child, do not confuse their fear with your destiny. Someone else's hesitation does not determine your worth. Their inability to speak does not make your intuition wrong. Their confusion does not mean you must remain trapped in waiting. Heaven is not showing you this so that you will chase someone who refuses to choose courage. Heaven is showing you this so that you will understand what has been happening beneath the surface. There is a difference between understanding someone and abandoning yourself for them. You are being asked to hold compassion without surrendering your peace. Your soulmate knows this too. They know you cannot remain suspended forever. They know your heart has carried more than it should. They know there were moments when you needed reassurance and received silence instead. They know there were times when one honest sentence could have prevented months of confusion. That awareness has become part of their burden. And this is where the hidden truth becomes even more personal. They have replayed one specific moment with you again and again. It was a moment you may have considered ordinary. Perhaps it was a quiet conversation. Perhaps it was a look. Perhaps it was the last time you felt close before everything changed. You may not know how deeply that moment affected them, but they remember it with painful clarity. They remember your tone. They remember the expression in your eyes. They remember what they wanted to say. And they remember choosing silence instead. That is the moment they wish they could return to. Because the words they swallowed that day were the beginning of the truth they are still hiding now. They wanted to tell you that they were afraid of how much you mattered. They wanted to admit that you had reached a place inside them no one else had reached. They wanted to say that your presence made them imagine a future they had never allowed themselves to desire. But at the same time, that future frightened them, because it required faith in something they could not control. So they stepped back. You felt the shift, even if you could not explain it. One moment, the connection seemed warm, alive, almost ready to become something undeniable. The next, there was distance. Their energy changed. Their words became guarded. Their responses grew slower or less certain. You wondered what you had done. But you had done nothing wrong. The closeness itself awakened their fear. That is one of the truths they have never confessed. However, it is not the final truth. There is something else hidden beneath it, something even more difficult for them to admit. Their fear did not arise only because the connection was intense. It arose because, in their heart, they already knew what they wanted. And what they wanted was you. Not a temporary version of you. Not a convenient connection. Not a half-hearted place in your life. They imagined something lasting. They imagined emotional safety, shared mornings, honest conversations, and a life where they no longer had to hide behind performance. But the moment they saw that possibility, they also saw everything they might lose if it failed. They became trapped between desire and fear. Instead of choosing love, they chose delay. And delay has now brought them to the edge of disappearance. There are nights when they prepare words for you in their mind. They imagine beginning gently, perhaps by asking how you have been. Then they imagine telling you everything. They imagine apologizing without excuses. They imagine confessing that the distance never represented a lack of feeling. Yet before they act, doubt returns. What if they no longer care? What if I reopen a wound? What if they reject me? What if I waited too long? These questions silence them again. But another question has started to overpower all the others. What if I disappear without ever telling the truth? That question is haunting them. It follows them into quiet rooms. It appears when they see something beautiful and instinctively think of you. It rises when they hear others speak about regret. It becomes louder every time they imagine a future in which your lives never cross again. Something huge is waiting beneath this silence, and the truth is closer to the surface than it has ever been. Your soulmate has begun to understand that disappearing will not protect either of you. It may prevent a difficult conversation, but it will also create a permanent absence. It may save them from immediate vulnerability, but it will leave them carrying an unfinished story for years. And deep within them, they know this connection was not meant to end through avoidance. It was meant to be faced. Not necessarily controlled. Not necessarily forced into the outcome either of you once imagined. But faced honestly. That is the spiritual turning point now unfolding. Heaven is not promising that another person will suddenly become perfect. Heaven is revealing that truth has begun pressing against the walls of their fear. The hidden cannot remain hidden forever. The emotions they buried are demanding acknowledgement. The choice they avoided is returning in a form they can no longer ignore. And you are also changing. You are no longer the same person who once waited quietly for someone else to decide your value. You have walked through disappointment. You have learned to survive uncertainty. You have begun to recognize that love without clarity can become a prison. Your soul is asking for more now. More honesty. More consistency. More courage. More peace. That is why the timing of this revelation matters. Had they spoken earlier, you might have accepted anything simply because you were relieved to hear from them. But now, you have grown. Now you understand that words must be followed by action. Now you know that a deep connection does not excuse emotional confusion. Your soulmate senses this growth, even from a distance. It is one of the reasons they are afraid. They know they cannot return with vague intentions. They know they cannot offer half-truths and expect you to remain available. They know that if they step toward you, they must do so with sincerity. And the final truth they are hiding will require exactly that. There is something they allowed you to believe that was never true. Perhaps you believed they had forgotten you. Perhaps you believed someone else replaced you. Perhaps you believed they never saw a future with you. Perhaps you believed your love was one-sided. But behind their silence, they have been protecting a secret that challenges everything you assumed. They did not disappear emotionally when they disappeared physically. They carried you with them. In quiet decisions, in comparisons, in regrets, in moments of longing, you remained present. They may have tried to build a life that did not include your name, but your impact remained woven into the way they thought, felt, and understood love. This does not erase what happened. It does not undo the hurt. But it explains why they have been unable to close the chapter completely. They never truly finished reading it. There is still one page they have refused to face. And on that page is the confession they believe could change everything. Do not skip now. The energy around this truth is intensifying because your soulmate has recently made a private decision. They have set a boundary within themselves, though you do not yet know it. They have decided that they cannot continue living between confession and escape. They believe they must choose one. Speak the truth. Or vanish completely. That is why the title of this message feels so final. Something within them has reached its limit. They can no longer remain in the same emotional place. Their heart has become exhausted by pretending. Their mind has become exhausted by imagining every possible outcome. A decision is approaching. Yet the truth they are preparing to reveal is not what you expect. It is not simply, I miss you. It is not merely, I made a mistake. It is not even only, I still love you. Those words are part of it, but they are not the deepest layer. The final truth is connected to the real reason they stepped away in the first place. You were given explanations that never felt complete. Perhaps they blamed timing. Perhaps they became distant without explanation. Perhaps circumstances seemed to pull you apart. But there was another reason, a reason tied to how deeply they saw you and what they believed would happen if they stayed. They were not only afraid of losing you. They were afraid you would truly know them. Not the polished version. Not the confident mask. Not the carefully controlled person they showed the world. They were afraid you would see their insecurities, their emotional wounds, their history, and the parts of themselves they had never learned to accept. Your love felt dangerous to their defenses because it invited them to be real. They sensed that you could see beyond their words. You noticed when their smile did not match their eyes. You felt when they were holding something back. You understood emotions they had not yet named. That kind of recognition can feel like home to a healed heart, but to a wounded heart, it can feel terrifying. So they ran from being seen. And in doing so, they wounded the person who saw them most clearly. This realization has become impossible for them to ignore. They now understand that you were not demanding perfection. You were asking for honesty. You were not trying to expose their weakness. You were offering a place where they did not have to hide. But they misunderstood your love because they had never experienced anything like it. Now they want to tell you. Yet shame stands at the door. They are ashamed of the pain their silence created. They are ashamed that fear controlled them. They are ashamed that they may have made you question yourself when the real battle was always inside them. And beneath that shame is one more secret. They did something after stepping away from you. Something they have never told anyone fully. It was not an act of betrayal in the way your mind may immediately imagine. It was an attempt to prove to themselves that they could live without this connection. They made a choice designed to silence their feelings. But instead of freeing them, that choice revealed the truth more clearly. They placed themselves in a situation where they expected to move on. They believed a new environment, a new routine, or perhaps even another emotional distraction would finally separate them from the memory of you. For a while, they acted as though it had worked. Then came the moment everything collapsed. They heard words they wished had come from you. They received attention that should have made them feel wanted. They stood in a place that should have felt like progress. But inside, they felt nothing. And suddenly, the truth became undeniable. It was never attention they wanted. It was connection. It was never simply companionship they missed. It was the way their soul felt understood around you. That moment terrified them because it removed every excuse. They could no longer say they had forgotten. They could no longer claim the bond had been temporary. They could no longer pretend that leaving had solved anything. It only taught them what your absence felt like. From that day forward, the thought of you returned with greater force. Memories they had buried rose again. Regret sharpened. The idea of contacting you became stronger. But so did the fear that you had discovered peace without them. And now, before they disappear forever, they are holding one final truth close to their heart. A truth they have written, deleted, rehearsed, and hidden. A truth that begins with an apology but ends with a revelation. A truth that explains not only why they left, but what they were secretly planning before fear changed everything. They had made a private promise about you. They had imagined a specific future. They had even taken one quiet step toward it without telling you. But something happened before they could reveal it. Something that made them believe disappearing was the only way to protect you from what they feared would come next. And tonight, as they stand between confession and goodbye, they are holding the evidence of that hidden promise in their hands, wondering whether to send it to you before the last door closes. Because the final truth is not merely that they loved you. The final truth is that before they disappeared, they had already chosen you, and the reason they never told you is about to change everything.